Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Enterprise Connect webinar, How to Implement Desktop Video Conferencing Without Plugins and Without Killing Your Network, brought to you by Enterprise Connect, CafeX, and UBM. I'm Michelle Burbick, Associate Editor at No Jitter and Program Coordinator for Enterprise Connect, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters. We will ask for your feedback later in the presentation. This webinar contains audience polling. Please complete the polls when they appear. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation. Simply type your question into the Ask a Question text area located below the media player, then click the Submit button. We will answer as many questions as time permits at the end of the presentation. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Download Slide button located below the presentation window. At this time, we recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help link below the video window. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is also located in the webinar help guide. If slides are not advancing, press your F5 key to refresh your console. Now, on to the presentation. How to implement desktop video conferencing without plugins and without killing your network. Discussing today's webinar will be Erwin Lazar, Vice President and Service Director at Nemertes Research, and Chris Hopkins, Chief Strategy Officer at CafeX. First today, we'll hear from Erwin.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and welcome again. Good morning, good afternoon, as Michelle said, depending on where you're located. My name is Erwin Lazar, and I am Vice President and Service Director at a company called Nemertes Research. And I have the pleasure to speak with you again this afternoon or this morning about what we're seeing with regard to trends in video conferencing, desktop video conferencing, growing demand for video communication and collaboration, and some of the challenges that organizations are facing as they go through that. So before I get too far in, just to give you a sense of what the information I'm hoping to convey, I'll give you a little sense of Nemertes and what we do and where our data comes from. We'll talk about some of the research that we've done recently around video conferencing, typically from the enterprise side, looking at drivers and demands and plans for growth. And kind of this chasm that is formed between this desire of enterprise organizations to enable ubiquitous video, enable people to be able to participate in video calls internally, externally, with customers, with partners from wherever they are using whatever device they're using, and the challenges in solutions like WebRTC that were kind of envisioned to fulfill that need. And then we'll wrap up with some recommendations and hand it off to Chris. So as I mentioned, I'm with an organization called Nemertes Research. We spend our time going out and gathering data from end-user organizations around how they use different technologies. We do this through a combination of interviews, through surveys, and we ask a lot of questions of our research participants, and it allows us to, A, keep their names anonymous, but get a good insight into what's going on in the real world. What are their challenges? What are their business opportunities? What are their costs, their experiences with different vendors? So as I go through this presentation, I'll share with you some research from a couple of different studies that are relevant to the topic at hand. So let's dive into the trends around video conferencing that we've seen. And we've done a couple of studies recently that have shown very strong demand for video in a couple of different ways. The first was a study of about 400 organizations that we conducted earlier this year around the idea of digital transformation. And that's a big buzzword now in the industry. We wanted to understand, what does it mean? When companies say that we have a digital transformation initiative and strategy, what exactly are they doing? And so what we found is digital transformation kind of boils down to three core interrelated components, as you can see here by the gears. We're looking at innovative application of different technologies, things like mobile and cloud and Internet of Things and analytics and so on, that allow us to have new information into how our customers behave, how our internal processes are conducted, and ways that we can increase agility, increase speed, increase throughput through the system. We then think about how we can take those technologies and apply them to increase business value. So we're looking at what can we improve, whether that's an internal process, a customer-facing process, I should say. Are there new kinds of services that we can deliver in terms of things that weren't possible in old worlds of technology? And so finally, we kind of wrap that together, and our goal is to improve customer experience. So how do we better engage with customers? How do we recognize who they are and optimize our engagement to the situation at hand? So, maybe a phone call is fine, but if I'm conducting a telemedicine session with a patient, it'd be great if I could see them. If I'm allowing a customer to show me or I want to see what they're looking at so I can walk them through troubleshooting a problem with their toaster or help them file a claim for their insurance online. Again, I'd like to have that ability to take advantage of video. And the goal at the end of this is to improve productivity, deliver new revenue streams, and overall deliver some competitive advantage to the organization. And we've seen that when we dive into the underlying technologies, where are people spending their money around digital transformation, we see the video is a key component of that. It had the highest correlation with success in terms of organizations that are investing in expanding their video initiatives and how they rate the success of their digital transformation. So a lot of the video focus that we see is often for customer-facing applications, distance learning, customer support, new services like I mentioned, telemedicine, show me what you're seeing type services, concierge type services where you want to give a richer experience to your customers. And so we're seeing that organizations are embracing cloud video so they can rapidly scale up and be able to support large numbers of video endpoints. And they're tying video, again, very closely into their overall digital transformation strategy. So that was customer-facing. Now looking at internal, and this is from a study that we're about to publish, our annual Unified Communications Collaboration Benchmark, largely based on data gathered from about 40 mid to very large-sized enterprise organizations. The mean employee count is around 10,000. And we find that the companies are continuing to expand their investments in video. Half are increasing video room systems. They're doing so to support increasing drivers. People are more comfortable with video. They're using video in their personal lives. They're using things like FaceTime on Apple devices and other kinds of consumer video services, and they're expecting to have that same level of experience at work. And as I mentioned at the digital transformation side, they're also looking at how can I use video to engage with partners, suppliers, customers, and so on. Users are demanding it. More than half say that users want more video. And an interesting switch, when we talk to organizations about video for the last few years, we often found the business case was predicated on travel reduction. We'll replace in-person trips with video. That's not necessarily the case now. People look at it as, how do I improve collaboration? How do I improve the ability of virtual teams, virtual work groups, customers, partners, and so on to communicate and collaborate when they're not in the same room and capture things like nonverbal communications and so on. We also see that utilization is going up about 42%, and our latest study said that those that are measuring utilization are seeing it go up. Nobody said it was falling, so the rest of the 58% said it was roughly flat. And we're seeing, again, some constraints that we'll talk about in a minute that are limiting more video. So Michelle, let me pull you back in, and we can conduct our first survey.
Sounds great. So we do have our first poll, should be showing on your screen in front of you. Please select all that apply. The question is, what video collaboration tools do you use at work? And your options are room and telepresence systems, application on my computer, application on my mobile device, hard endpoint at my desk, other, or none. And I'll give you just a little bit of time to answer if our audience aligns with Erwin's research at Nemertes. I would guess we'd see quite a spread. But as we're waiting, I'll give you a few seconds to answer still. I just want to remind you, you can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time. We are reserving about the last 15 minutes for Q&A, so get your questions in as they come to you, and we'll get to as many as possible at the end of the presentation. So with that said, let's see what our audience has to say about the video collaboration tools in use. All right. Quite a spread. I will hand it over to Erwin for you to discuss and continue on.
Yeah, I think that sort of echoes what we've seen, is that people are increasingly using things, applications on their personal computer. We've tracked mobile video for a number of years. We found that It's often used more for streaming, and so people that want to watch corporate videos on their devices, but not necessarily does it provide a great experience for collaborative type sessions. You got to mount the camera somewhere and mount the phone somewhere where it's not bouncing around as somebody's moving and so on. But we are seeing a strong uptick in desktop video, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in our next few slides. So we found the majority of organizations today are using desktop video conferencing, meaning they support it, they allow it on their network. This is actually a bit of a change over the last few years. Historically, we found a lot of trepidation around the use of desktop video because organizations were afraid of the network impact. You know, what happens when I've got a high-definition stream with hundreds of people participating in conferences and multiple conferences with traffic flows going places I never could imagine. And yet we've seen that the desire for video, the introduction of lower bandwidth consuming video services have really driven more video usage and more video adoption within our enterprise organizations. We found that, as I mentioned, utilization is going up. 63% of our benchmark participants telling us that they're seeing growth or demand in desktop video conferencing utilization for 2017. So it was a little bit lower, as we noted on the previous slide, in 2016. But now you're seeing an even smaller chunk of organizations that say flat to we're not really sure, we don't measure it, is really that remaining 18%. And so, you know, it's the same cases that keep coming up. Employees want video. It's getting easier to use. It's more available on desktops, as we saw. Most laptops and PCs now come with a camera. Most mobile devices have front and rear facing cameras, at least more of the advanced ones. And organizations are starting to think more about not having desktop video as part of an overall video solution. It's integrated into the rest of the video portfolio and not just a separate application, meaning that if I've got several people in different rooms that are using video sessions and I can't make it into those rooms for whatever reason, I should be able to still see what's going on and let them see who I am. So looking at delivering a more holistic video solution. So we've seen that companies tend to lag in terms of utilization. It's still a fairly small amount of companies today that are measuring utilization, about 31%, another 12 that are planning. And we find that organizations are struggling with this because IT tends to be under increasing pressure to justify the business value of their investments. So if I'm investing money in video solutions, I want to be able to come back to line of business and say, here's what you got for it. You closed more sales. You had shorter project times. You had happier customers, better partner relationships, and so on. And if I'm not measuring utilization, not able to tie utilization into who's using it, into the business process that it's being used for, I don't really have good insight into the role of video and what that business value is. Those that do measure utilization rate their self-rated video success about 40% higher than those that don't. And that's simply, you know, how do you rate your overall video success on a 1 to 10 scale? And then we correlate a number of factors. So measuring utilization does, at least from that self-rated metric, make you feel like you're more successful. And now we're starting to see harder metrics, which one example of an organization I interviewed where they track sales team use of video, and they found that sales teams that were using video to engage with prospects were closing more deals than those that weren't. Very tangible way to calculate the value of video. So those who don't measure, or those who do measure utilization, though, have actually seen it falling. So looking at the percentage of people that use it 2 times per week, it's going down. So we have a little bit of a disconnect here. We've got the demand for video. We've got the digital transformation that's driving use of video, familiarity, more video available. It's more out there. People want it, but they're actually using it a little bit less. So the question becomes why? Why is that? Obviously, that's something that if you're responsible for video in your organization, you want to be aware of and you want to do something to fix. And so we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. And one of the things that we've seen is that desktop is replacing room use. So if you go back to that last poll question, we saw that more people were using desktop applications for video than anyone else. So we see that shift toward desktop. We see that desktop is replacing room use for a number of people, or for room deployment, so shifting to more of a desktop-centric approach. And so some of those use cases are more of the one-on-one type scenarios where you're looking at things like job interviews, meetings, one-on-one meetings, and so on. But virtual workers often, who don't have access to a room are another good use case for desktop. So that leaves us with this picture of we've got different room and desktop. We've got a number of organizations that have not yet integrated their room systems with their desktops. And that could be one key factor that keeps desktop utilization low, because it's not part of the overall video strategy, overall video solution. And we ask people why they're not doing it yet, and we get a myriad of different answers. It's expensive. I don't have control over everything. It's too difficult for me to implement interworking. People aren't asking for it in a small number of organizations. We're going to go to a single vendor someday, so we're just going to wait till we have that. So you can see if you look at the span of how do people integrate desktop and room, about 35%, 36% are all one vendor, so integration's easy. But the majority, 64% or so, either don't do anything or they go off and they spend money on a separate platform solely to integrate desktop and room, and not necessarily providing the best user experience, one click to start meetings, the ability to schedule, and so on. So is there a way to get around some of these challenges? Can we deliver a solution that allows desktop video ubiquitously interconnected with our rooms, no need for plugins, no need for software, everyone gets it, and so on? Well, that was the promise of WebRTC, and I've co-chaired the WebRTC track at Enterprise Connect now for the last 4 years with Brent Kelly, and we've been tackling the issues around WebRTC for a number of years. The promise of WebRTC is really what drives, I think, interest, and why it's gotten its own track at Enterprise Connect, and we've had hundreds of people show up for our sessions. It's because people look at that ubiquitous desktop video as a means to close that gap and deliver video everywhere without having to spend a lot of money, without having to make it difficult. We don't have to support applications. We don't have to send out upgrades and so on. So for those of you who aren't familiar with WebRTC, I'll take a quick minute and explain it. Basically what it is this idea that we've got a voice, video, and screen sharing capability built into browsers. We'll put a little script, a little bit of code in the browsers that enables application developers to take advantage of it and conduct a video conference, audio call, screen sharing session, even exchange data, without ever having to put a plugin in, without ever having to require people click on a link, download an app, go through that install process. And that's the promise. That's what we were hoping to, the folks that created WebRTC within the IETF and the World Wide Web Consortium were hoping to create. And the characteristics, they tried to leverage a lot of what was out there already. They're leveraging HTML and JavaScript. They leveraged some of the work that had been done for the session initiation protocol and some of the ways that you use that were defined to enable things like network address traversal, encryption, session descriptions, and so on. And they also looked at a peer-to-peer type solution that if I had a WebRTC client in my browser, I could connect theoretically with any other WebRTC client, set up a call without having to have any kind of infrastructure make that call happen. The vision, of course, was that there would be the ability to interconnect with room systems, with other desktop applications, and so on. Very well-defined voice codecs out there, but video codecs we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. Still not quite there. So the WebRTC business case is pretty similar to what we saw earlier for desktop video. Remote customers can come in through our website or through an app that's typically leveraging WebRTC calls within that app. But again, the idea truly would have been a desktop. Virtual worker desktops where I could have people working remotely at home, customer sites, and so on. They don't have to start up a VPN. They come directly in through the client capabilities within their browser. I could enable guest access for things like video calls. I could set up kiosks that are browser-based and enable people to walk up and click on a link or touch something on a screen and initiate a call or a video chat. Telemedicine is a great application. We've had a number of organizations at Enterprise Connect that are delivering telemedicine-type solutions for patient video using WebRTC, and again, making it simpler on the end user. So again, all this promise of WebRTC, it's a pretty, I think, apparent use case. But now you run into the reality, which is it's not widely used at this point. The adoption trends, this is from our latest benchmark from, again, about 40 very large organizations, about 10,000 employees, show that only 9% actually were deploying WebRTC in 2016. And that's up from 0 in 14 and 15. So you're seeing it kind of head in the right direction. But given the technology's now been available in Chrome and Firefox for a number of years, you'd expect that these numbers would be significantly higher. And the challenge is there are still strong obstacles that have limited WebRTC implementation. So what are the challenges? It really goes to somewhat of an immature standard at this point. The video codec has not yet been standardized. The ITF working group about I guess almost 2 years ago now, published guidelines saying that all WebRTC browsers should support both 264 and VP8. VP8 being the Google codec, 264 a much more open codec, but pushed by the video conferencing vendors like Cisco and some others. But today, browsers don't necessarily have support for both. H.264 requires paying of a license fee, which some browser manufacturers don't want to do. WebRTC doesn't work well in a network address translation environment, which the reality is that's most enterprise networks today using private addressing. WebRTC has that same fundamental flaw of SIP. It has to know what it embeds its source IP address in its header messages. So when it sends a message to a browser on the other end or a gateway on the other end, and it sends its private IP address if it's behind a NAT. So it must first go through a check to see, well, what do I look like on the outside? Let me put that address in, and then hopefully that gateway is smart enough to detect the session, route traffic back to me. So it uses some well-known approaches, but it creates an additional layer of network complexity. Browser support, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, yeah, no problem. Microsoft Edge has something called ORTC, which is a Microsoft variant of WebRTC, and Internet Explorer and Safari, not quite, although there's been some discussion about building it into the next engine that underlies Safari. On the network side, as WebRTC came out with support for VP8 and 264, the rest of the world is now starting to move to more advanced video codecs, BP9, H.265, scalable video coding, all with lower network impact, the ability to work better in lossy networks in the case of SVC, and no real way of supporting that today in WebRTC. And as I mentioned, Microsoft has their version that they've been pushing called ORTC. There's been some continual effort within the ITF working group to align around making compatibility between WebRTC and ORTC, and then potentially developing a next generation that combines both of those and has backward compatibility, but it's not there yet. So the reality of the situation is, for most organizations, it's a WebRTC world where only if you have Chrome or Firefox. If you're using or Opera, if you're using other browsers, you're still having to use a plugin or still having to download an application. So we haven't really realized on that value of WebRTC that we were hoping to see. So the WebRTC business case, as I mentioned, adoption has been low, and these constraints have stymied its use. It's stymied the realization of the ability of WebRTC to deliver ubiquitous video, to easily connect to room systems, to reduce costs, to give us that simple environment, low-cost environment that I mentioned earlier. And so the challenge for organizations is, how do I still meet that goal of delivering seamless access to video from anywhere, any device, without requiring plugins, without requiring applications, giving the ability to integrate with back-end solutions, while I can still overcome the WebRTC constraints. And what can I do once I've got that? What are some of the additional business cases? And we talked about some of those already around telemedicine and so on. So there's a number of alternatives that have emerged, and I'll talk very quickly about Chime, because I'm going to leave Chris to dive a little bit more deeply into it. But Chime is the CafeX product that is JavaScript-based, so very similar to WebRTC. But it uses, and again, I'll let Chris go into the details, it doesn't run into the NAT issues, meaning you don't have to worry about can you get across the network address translation gateway, can you overcome a NAT that might not be aware of the session, and so on. We'll talk a little bit more about the clustering ability for sessions to interconnect among themselves without having to not having each endpoint having to connect to a gateway or having to connect to an MCU, and the ability to use dynamically downloadable codecs to take advantage of some of the emerging codecs and get around that disconnect between, well, my browser talks VP8 and yours talks VP9 and yours talks H.264, and now we need something in the middle to mediate that discussion and make this session work. Other solutions we've seen some interest in within organization, GenBand has something called OmniClient, but OmniClient's a little bit of it's almost I don't want to say a hack, but it takes a WebRTC compliant browser and makes that an application that you then put on your device, and then you can then take advantage of WebRTC. So it's still a different app that has to be downloaded and installed, but it does allow developers to create WebRTC-based applications. Another approach advocated by a company called Nemertes is a universal plugin. So why should each WebRTC application have its own plugin? Why not just put this one plugin into browsers and then everyone can access it? Again, it's a plugin. It has to be maintained. It has to be supported by security approaches and so on. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris, and we'll, I think, head into one more poll question. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I had one more slide. Apologies for that. So we had, so just to wrap up, I think, the key things that we're telling our end user organizations. Video conferencing is here. Demand is growing. Utilization is expected to go up. People want it. They want simplicity. They want low cost. They want ease of use. And they want to be able to easily connect to video from wherever they are, on whatever device they are, and have that ability to be part of a holistic room and desktop and mobile device video solution. So expect for video to increase and the use cases for video to increase, and really focus on what can you do to minimize cost, minimize network impact, minimize IT need for manageability, and make things easier for the end users. Definitely measure utilization if you're not, and look for those business cases that will allow you to justify further investments in video. Look at WebRTC. Again, the standards continue to develop, but also look at the solution we'll look at in a minute from CafeX that allows you to achieve some of that WebRTC promise without the constraints that we talked about earlier. So with that, I will wrap up, and thank you for your time, and turn it over to Chris.
Hi, I will jump in. This is Michelle.
Michelle.
Thank you, Erwin. We are ready for our next poll question. So it should be appearing on your screen now. It says, how is WebRTC being adopted within your company? And your options are currently using, planning, evaluating, no plans, not sure. And I'll give you a little bit of time to submit your answers. While we're waiting for you, I will reintroduce Chris Hopkins, who will be continuing on with the presentation after the poll. Chris Hopkins is the Chief Strategy Officer at CafeX. So Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much.
And I think this is a pretty simple question, so I think we've given enough time. Let's see what the audience has to say. All right. It looks like the majority are either evaluating or have no plans. So, Chris, I will hand it over to you. You can discuss this and carry on with your presentation if you'd like.
Great. Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I think if you look at these results with 13.8% of people currently using WebRTC, that's probably a little bit further along the curve than the market research that Erwin shared with us, but the evaluation is very much in that ballpark. So people are planning, they're evaluating, and only under 15% of people are actually currently using WebRTC. And we've seen that here at CafeX. So CafeX has been, again, founded in 2013. We've been at the forefront of WebRTC adoption, very familiar with using web-based as well as Android and iOS clients that utilize WebRTC to allow for collaboration with voice, video. Anyway, and we've seen that same struggle, is that there are some issues. And I'll go into why we see those and what we're doing to address those same struggles. So today I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of CafeX and introduce you to CafeX. I'm also going to talk about our pervasive collaboration solution that we call Chime. Chime really addresses those organizations that Erwin talked about, those 42% of organizations that either have their telepresence solutions disconnected from their employee base so that people really can't reach when they're remote into the internal systems that they have already deployed, those existing assets that they have in every conference room that are frankly often underutilized. And we think we have a solution to that to increase utilization and improve collaboration within your enterprise. And then the other is to address the guests, how guests actually can connect, even if they might be on different UC infrastructure from what you've deployed internally. But you need to work with your business partners, your customers, as well as those employees who are remote, and provide solutions to them. So with that, why don't I get started? So at CafeX here, we're making together happen. And whether or not it's customers talking to experts inside your business, employees collaborating together, or a business partner and yourself achieving the same strategic goals together. And really that's what we're all about, is creating collaboration tools that you can use across your enterprise to reach broadly. Now, as I said before, CafeX was founded in 2013, and we've endeavored on this epic journey to make solutions and make success happen with collaboration tools. So we've had some great success throughout our tenure, which is that we've built some wonderful and strong customers. We've had impressive partners that we've worked with over the past 3 years, and some strategic investors to build a solid company with a history of success and execution going forward. So we're someone that you can rely on, that will be around a very long time, with lots of strategic investors, partners, as well as a good client base that you can refer to and understand. CafeX has over 100 employees, growing every day, and we think we're poised to be we're on the cusp of doing some really great things with many, many customers beyond the base that we have today. So let's talk about pervasive collaboration. Our goal, our vision, is to really improve access to collaboration tools across your entire employee base. So that means simply many times working across any browser, working across mobile. There's no custom endpoints, and it can work on any platform that you choose to deploy inside your enterprise. And that means we'll also reduce the complexity of those same solutions, the infrastructure, and cost. And so that's what we mean by pervasive collaboration. It should, again, the fingertips of the solution should reach all down to the level that you want, to every employee that you need to enable with video-based collaboration. But also simplifying the solution to make sure that it's easy to deploy. And you can't do one without the other. You really need to be able to pervade into the entire enterprise without breaking the bank or causing a lot of impedance in terms of getting that solution rolled out. And Chime is very much in that way. So one of those solutions to address those problems in terms of pervasive collaboration, as Erwin discussed, is WebRTC. And WebRTC has really struggled in that adoption, as we even saw from our polling, is that it's just getting started. And many people are using it, or they're using it as part of other products. But WebRTC's had some bad and rough edges for the enterprise, namely Safari, Edge, and IE don't provide WebRTC support today. So sorry, that's Safari for Apple, Internet Explorer, and Microsoft Edge. Those browsers dominate throughout the enterprise, and to have those forgotten or left out just makes it really, really difficult to deploy WebRTC in earnest. Another is that WebRTC can be very bandwidth and resource intensive on the client side when you're doing peer-to-peer conferencing. So it makes it really easy to deploy, but it can be very detrimental to your network, as well as cause issues on the laptops or mobile devices themselves when you bring in multiple parties. So a lot of WebRTC solutions have been one-on-one between a customer and an export, CafeX being a very good example of that. But when you go beyond that, you need either an expensive conferencing unit, or you need to sacrifice bandwidth and client performance with peer-to-peer conferencing. The architectures are pretty complex for enterprises as well. They'll have signaling gateways, stun, turn, media servers, as well as conferencing units or selective forwarding units in order to be deployed and make collaboration happen. And each one of those different types of servers, again in their own complexity and in their own deployment architecture, scale differently. So while you may need a media routing engine that supports turn in the cloud, that's going to be deployed in the cloud, but your media server that does transcoding would be local to your enterprise. And each one of those scales differently based upon usage patterns. So how many times do you relay through a turn server your media when it's based in the cloud versus how many times do you need to do transcoding? Each one of those have separate and different architectures and different deployment characteristics. And that can be cumbersome for the enterprise to manage and deploy to. So with that, we want to introduce Chime. Chime reaches everyone, be it a mobile or a web user. Conferences are quick to start because you're just invoking a link. It provides all the essential voice, video, chat, as well as presentation sharing that make collaboration happen at the desktop. It's a beautifully intuitive application that simply spawns when you go and pull up your browser, and it is any browser. So it will actually work on Internet Explorer. It will work on Edge. It will work on Safari. It will work on Chrome, and it will work on Firefox and even Opera. And with that, that means everybody can touch Chime. Everyone can use Chime, whether or not they are working from home, they're using their wife's laptop, they happen to be on a remote connection, or if they're deployed anywhere. And then lastly is that Chime addresses those issues that Erwin identified where existing telepresence is being underutilized, and it allows people to connect their browsers into existing Cisco as well as Avaya, Polycom, telepresence infrastructure. So those very room conferencing systems that you've invested in can now be reached by people outside of your organization, be it guests or remote employees. So welcome to Chime. Chime starts with a simple roundtable. So each participant can go and be seen in this roundtable mode where everyone's equal and everyone feels like they're an active participant in a conference. And this is what they'd see in their browser, is as people come into the conference, they would be populated around the central figure who's doing all the speaking. We also have a more traditional interface where, again, the active speaker can be seen in a larger, more expanded full-screen view, but each participant is listed on the left side. Now you have all the conference controls that you'll need too. You'll be able to mute, you'll be able to turn off video, you can switch layout modes, you can also chat, do presentation sharing, and all that is shareable across Chime users, other Chime users, people using soft clients that you've already predisposed like Jabber, or Microsoft Skype for Business, or the telepresence systems themselves. So again, Chime can both be an augmentation of your existing soft clients that you've deployed, an augmentation of your telepresence solution, but also provide an easy way to do ad hoc meetings when you just need to connect really fast. So enterprises are really excited about Chime, and that's because of the dominant benefits that they're seeing, which is that meetings start on time. You don't need to download or install anything new with Chime. You're not adding a plugin to Internet Explorer or to Safari. We've fixed all those problems that you've seen in WebRTC. So that means you're not waiting to get that install, you're not dealing with an OS level issue, you're not dealing with permission problems right before an important meeting that you couldn't go and get all that stuff done for. So meetings start on time. We also reach everyone securely. Skype and Cisco and other solutions go and connect via traditional voice over IP. That means that they have a separate security policy. With Chime, everything's in the browser and the mobile app, and it's just one single security policy, completely encrypted using the same web encryption that you know and work with every day, the same type of encryption that you use to do your transactions online. And that makes it really comfortable for IT to deploy so that they can get through security audits, understand the complexities of deploying video collaboration without a lot of headaches of having multiple security policies or insecure and different systems that they need to worry about where voice and video are different from their web infrastructure. The other thing is that Chime connects more reliably. You can reach every meeting participant every time. And we do that a couple of ways. One, by broad browser support to make sure that participants can can be reached, right? So they can use any browser they need, but also every time. That means we can bury through firewalls, and we don't have a lot of the network address translation issues that were highlighted with WebRTC. We actually use different transport in conjunction with WebRTC technologies to make all that happen. That means when you're remote and at a secure enterprise, Chime will work, whereby other voice over IP and video over IP technologies might fail because they have broad port expansions that need to be handled. So Chime just simply works on regular, old, secure HTTPS on port 443. It's really, really simple. We're also ideal for enterprise IT in that we have less user headaches, so people connect more often, they connect easily, they don't have install problems anymore, so that's less tickets that are opened. It's a simpler architecture for Chime, and it uses existing web security policies, and it's more network benign. With Chime, there are really three use cases that Chime's trying to address for our enterprise customers. One is ubiquitous employee access for those employees who are remote or who are working from their desktop, that they can reach those telepresence systems that are internal to that enterprise. Second is that guests who might not have access to install new plugins or can't install GoToMeeting or Zoom or other web conferencing solutions because they've standardized on something else, they can use Chime, and they won't be delayed by trying to install a new plugin or being blocked from doing that installation. They won't be frustrated when they join that meeting because they can get right in every time using their browser of choice and what their organization has chosen to be their browser of choice. And lastly is a future utilization of Chime is in-app collaboration. So this is taking all the goodness of Chime, the ability to go work on any browser without downloading or installing anything new, working across firewalls and not seeing the same problems with WebRTC, but embedding that capability within your own web portals and your mobile applications. And Chime will fit into our SDK portfolio as well. So we're starting with use case 1 and 2, and we're expanding to use case 3 over the course of the year. Let me talk quickly about some of the magic behind Chime. So Chime does have some very unique capabilities. Number one, on our left side of this screen, we support every major browser, be it Safari, Internet Explorer, Edge, Chrome, or Firefox, and any employee would be able to use any of those browsers in order to connect. Two is that we get through firewalls very, very easily. There's no separate turn server. There's no separate media proxy that needs to be deployed in order to get that. There's no wide range of firewall ports that need to be opened at the firewall. It is one single port, and it goes right through your reverse proxy just as normal web traffic does. And that means there also is nothing being deployed in the DMZ. And our enterprises love that aspect of Chime because now you're not getting special security clearance to add another session border controller within your DMZ that might be exposed and offer some security risk with different policies other than the web policies you've already implemented. Again, Chime fits right in. One standard security web policy, nothing separate for voice and video. We also have a single server type, one virtualized server that can be deployed in the cloud or on-premise. That means it's easy to scale. There's no worry about 5 different components. How many turn servers do I need? What types of deployment architectures? How much transcoding can I do? We normalize all the codecs to one single codec so that we're not doing any transcoding in Chime. We don't need those same media resources that other solutions need. So one server that scales very, very easily and easy to deploy because it's not in your DMZ. Number 5 is that we connect into your existing telepresence conferencing infrastructure. So we go and connect to the SIP interfaces off of a multi-conferencing unit or a gateway that you might provide into your telepresence solutions. We can even connect into specific telepresence units that offer MCU capabilities within them. But that's our bridge, is that we can go and connect into Cisco, Microsoft, and other UC systems that have telepresence deployed so that you can reach into those rooms. Lastly, Chime's pretty dynamic. We don't get confused by changes in network conditions. So if you're jumping from Wi-Fi to 4G, Chime will continue. So enterprise employees love that. If they're using it on a mobile or they're using it on their desktop and network conditions change, Chime powers right through that. So you can jump from Wi-Fi and 4G and be very, very happy. And lastly, one of our more unique features is that we offer clustering between clients. And clustering allows individual browsers and soon mobile endpoints to collect together and share the media resources and act like a mini conferencing bridge together. That allows us to reduce the amount of bandwidth as well as reduce the conferencing ports that are needed or conferencing server solutions that are needed in order to deploy Chime. So again, just a quick recap. Works on every browser. Nothing new to install. So be it Edge, Internet Explorer, or Safari, we have you covered. Chime is pervasive. It is easy to invoke in any browser just with a simple link. And we think that that's really key for our enterprise customers. 2, Chime offers a lot of savings for our customer base. We can reduce MCU utilization for those users using Chime because of our client clustering capability. They will aggregate media amongst themselves and only connect to conferencing resources if there happens to be a telepresence unit on board, and they will also consolidate their own media together. And that's one of the more unique aspects of Chime. And when we do that aggregation, when clients cluster together, that actually reduces WAN bandwidth too. So we don't have the same network impact that other solutions do, where each client is connecting into a single port of a conferencing server. Chime collects all those together, so we can actually reduce the WAN bandwidth. It's easy to deploy on-premise or in the cloud, and it's compatible with Cisco Telepresence as well as Microsoft Skype for Business. So that savings really translates to wonderful things for enterprise IT. Chime is architecturally simple, so there's no turn server. It's one single server. It's really easy to deploy. There's no new client software that you need to deploy down to each and every endpoint, every platform that's out there. Those laptops simply use their browser that you have authorized and done. And Chime scales easily. We don't have the same problems where we're not doing transcoding between multiple endpoints. We normalize all that between Chrome and Edge. And that's a lot of novelty there in that we don't suffer the same slings and arrows that other WebRTC vendors do, where we actually have to go and convert VP8 into H.264. We do that normalization at the browser and at the mobile endpoint themselves. And our friends at McKinsey show that if you offer the types of savings that are with Chime, it's easy to add a solution like Chime into your portfolio, and you won't be alone in doing that. Is that 52% of organizations, all the way up to 90% of organizations, will see if they have savings of 25% or greater, will adopt a second solution and switch to a second solution for that pervasive collaboration. Let's see. And before we start questions, I just wanted to say, if you want to learn more about Chime, just simply email us at info@cafex.com or download the Nemertes white paper on pervasive collaboration at cafex.com. In both cases, we'll get you started. We'll get you to be able to evaluate Chime, see a live demonstration, as well as answer any questions that you have. With that, I think it's time to start our Q&A, Michelle.
All right, excellent. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. To our audience, as we begin with today's Q&A, I want to ask you if you could please fill out the survey that should have opened up on your computer. To complete the form, please press the Submit Answer button at the bottom of the page. And now on to the question and answer portion of our event. Excuse me. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area, then click the Submit button. I have seen a handful of questions come in, so let's get started. All right. I have a question for Chris. Someone wants to know if there's a download for Internet Explorer users.
So the answer is no, that there's no new download for Internet Explorer users. We gain access to your camera and microphone, where each user is authorized, through existing technologies that are part of Internet Explorer today. So in our case, we actually use Flash to go and grab the microphone and camera. But that's not how we encode or handle video. We do that ourselves through a proprietary technology that we've developed. In Chrome and Firefox, we'll use WebRTC to do that element. But in IE, we don't have that same media stack in order to do it. So again, nothing to download on IE or Safari. You get started right away with Chime, and that's a little bit part of the magic.
All right, excellent. Thank you. My next question is for Erwin. As the global workforce grows increasingly mobile, do you see room systems becoming a niche play, with utilization shifting to desktop and mobile video conferencing?
Like I said in my portion of the presentation, we definitely see an increase in desktop away from room, so becoming more important of a component. I wouldn't say that room systems become a niche. Room systems are getting cheaper, smaller, easier to deploy. We published a study earlier in the year showing that companies are starting to expand room systems into the small meeting rooms, the huddle spaces, and so on. So I think you do get away from the scenario where a room system is viewed as a large capital expense. It's a two-screen, 55-inch type system that you see only in larger conference rooms, to one where room systems are everywhere. And the definition of room system can change. It can be, a Logitech NUC device potentially running the Chime software on it, or a PC connected to a screen that's running, a client-type software application. So I think the solutions like Chime and WebRTC that we've talked about definitely allow a broader definition of what exactly is a room system.
All right, thank you. Let's see what else has come in. Chris, during your presentation, we had a comment about the view that the users have. Wanting to know if the view is different per user or if it's the same view for everybody in terms of the view of the presentation.
Yeah, I think as James was alluding to in his question was that those views are fairly static, is that we're creating more views and can be very flexible because of the way Chime is deployed. So Chime is a web technology. But right now it is pretty, you do flip between those two views, where you have the round table, which is very inclusive and shows everybody in their own circles around the centralized viewer, or that standard view where the person who's speaking is in full screen mode, or the presentation is being shown in that full screen area. Let's see, we are looking into additional views or being able to customize those and brand those views, but they're not there yet with Chime. Chime is really just starting to be introduced, and it's a part of that. So more to come on that front.
All right, excuse me. All right, thank you. Next question. Which vendors offer bandwidth management for scaled desktop video deployments?
All right.
Erwin?
Why don't I handle this?
All right.
So in this case, a lot of different solutions, when they're using voice and video, they offer bandwidth management in the clients themselves. That means they actually can go and control the bit rate dynamically based upon being bandwidth constrained at the client. Chime does that as well, and when we're using WebRTC to handle that, we'll go and adjust the bit rate of our video to surmount any bandwidth issues we might encounter over the course of a call. But Chime works a little bit differently than other bandwidth management solutions in that our clustering is totally unique. So in our case, we look for browsers who have like solutions, and then we allow them to set up peers within a cluster that can share video amongst themselves. And when they do that, all that video and voice is localized. And then one element within that cluster will share all the voice and video, all the active voice and video up to the Chime server, which is then forwarded on to other elements that are participating in the conference. That aggregation is what provides you the massive savings in terms of bandwidth as well as conferencing utilization that Chime can do. So again, very standardized bandwidth management capabilities of adaptive bandwidth controls that are in WebRTC as well as other voice and video solutions are utilized today within Chime, but we take that one step further with our client clustering capability.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I have another question came in, and this one is for Chris. How many concurrent users can connect to a Chime session?
So right now, a Chime session is defined as when you're sharing one voice and video session. So Chime clusters can range between a single node or a single browser all the way up to typically 8. And we see on average somewhere between 2 and 4 people creating clusters all the time. And we look at a variety of different network conditions to determine that. Now that's just the clustering. A conference can be much, much larger than that. So we can handle within a Chime conference itself where only people are using their browsers or Chime mobile apps in the future, they can actually go up to 8 concurrent parties in an ad hoc meeting. But the instant you want to go into a larger conferencing bridge or utilize audio conferencing or a telepresence solution itself, Chime can go to hundreds of people because each one of those clusters connect into the conferencing solution itself. And that's how we bridge it in. So it really depends on your sizing. How big do you want to get let Chime conferences be? And that's a setting within our solution that you can control. So we have a whole bunch of server-side tools that allow you to look at how clustering happens, what type of conference was created, where it got connected to in terms of your network infrastructure, and those are very, very valuable in terms of the deployment and maintenance of Chime.
Excellent. As a follow-up question to that, someone wants to know if Chime supports streaming and recording.
Chime doesn't support streaming and recording today, but obviously that a lot of the conferencing solutions that we plug into do. So if you have an MCU-based system or a selective forwarding unit that Chime can go and connect into, those often have video streaming as well as recording already in place. And we don't want to replace those solutions if you already have them. If you're recording your room systems and allowing recording to happen, Chime's going to fit right into those existing recording solutions that you have. But keep on a lookout. As we expand our roadmap, we'll offer recording as well as different types of streaming, because lots of people are very interested in how that clustering can go and benefit large conferences as well as town hall meetings or enterprise-wide meetings. Can we go and do content delivery through the clustering that we've highlighted here? So right now everything's real time, but soon you might see some amazing stuff coming out of Chime.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you to Erwin for both providing such great information today. We're pretty much at the end of our time now, so I want to welcome the audience for any more information to visit the resource links that should be open in front of you now. And thank you all for attending today's webinar titled How to Implement Desktop Videoconferencing Without Plugins and Without Killing Your Network, brought to you by Enterprise Connect, CafeX, and UBM. Shortly after the live event, we will send you an email reminder to access this presentation on demand. This webinar is copyright 2016 by UBM. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that is the case, by Enterprise Connect and CafeX, who are solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. So on behalf of our guest, Erwin Lazar, Vice President and Service Director at Nemertes Research, and Chris Hopkins, Chief Strategy Officer at CafeX, thank you all for your time and have a great day.